Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. Now for this tutorial I will be showing you the painting process for my tree city. Now I'm showing you the stages after the rough painting portion. So essentially I roughed out the major colors and now I'm just refining the colors so that they flow better together. I'm also going to be adding some variations in the colors by sampling the colors that I already have and modifying some of them when I need to. What I do normally find is necessary, depending on which style I'm achieving or trying to achieve, is although I'll block in the major colors, I often find it's necessary to go in and increase the saturation level of certain key areas of focus. This gives me a bit more control over the overall composition and how I want the viewer to actually be viewing the image. So essentially I'll paint in the whole image and then I'll go on top of it and start adding some additional colors that way. So I might punch up the darks. I may also go in and like I said, increase the saturation. I'll definitely do that with highlights as well. So I'm starting with the main trunk of the tree because this is the majority of the painting is actually taken up by the tree itself. So it's important that I get the proper structure showing through with the shading. So the shading I'm doing is more of a design type shading, so it's not necessarily that the shading is actually correct for this type of lighting condition. But that being said, it also makes it easier to go in afterwards and darken up certain areas if I need to give that effect. So the shading I'm using is actually focusing on the form of the image. I want to show the shapes. I am going into the crevices and making sure that those have obviously darker regions. Those wouldn't receive as much light for sure. However, essentially the most protruding areas in this painting all have a very high level of bright colors to them, which you wouldn't typically see. So the painting portion for this image wasn't actually too long. Like once you generally block out the general colors, which is generally not very difficult and doesn't take very much time, you already have quite a bit of the work done. So once I've essentially smoothed out all the colors so that they work appropriately, then it's just a matter of tweaking what I already have. And I just go layer by layer and just keep on adding layers as I go to do that normally. Now, from a production standpoint, you wouldn't normally paint a layout like this if you're doing something for an animation studio. You would actually make everything on a separate layer, so the mushrooms would probably be on a separate layer, especially if they're touching each other. You would have to separate those out manually. The reason why you do that is that it makes it easier for your director to go in and make modifications and changes later. And this is very important because you're trying to also save time. And putting everything on a separate layer actually does save quite a bit of editing time for refining the image. Obviously it'll depend on the complexity of the image. In this case, this is my personal work, so I'm not overly concerned about that because I know I can just go in and paint over it. I'm not too worried. But if I was doing this as an actual job, I would actually be doing this on separate layers just because it's better for that. Now that being said, if I was working for a different studio, for an animation studio, generally they would give me color keys which would tell me exactly what colors I should be using. This helps simplify the process so that you're not guessing about the style. In this case I'm creating a new style, a new image, so once again I'm not too worried about that. Blocking in the colors are generally the more important phase and refining those colors afterwards. So I'm just starting on the foliage. I ended up adding essentially a main color and then going in afterwards and selectively choosing where I wanted the highlights to be. This made it a bit easier for me to work on the foliage and also separate the different volumes. And it also helped really lead back into the style that I was trying to achieve. So I'm just going in now and just blocking in the rough the highlights for the foliage so that I can bring out the details a bit more and show a little bit of a receding detail line for it as well. So essentially I'm using the same brush throughout this image. I didn't change my brush at all. This highlight is placed on a separate layer so I can easily erase it and modify it so that it's not as dark. So I'm just sampling the colors that I already have and erasing out areas that I don't need as I go. So at this stage I started refining the colors and increasing the level of saturation, and also erasing out some of those portions to make sure that they blend in a bit better. I found that the mushrooms didn't have enough color to them. In general, the colors I had chosen just don't have enough saturated colors in the foreground. It is a focus area, so I do want to include enough saturation in these areas so that they stand out from the rest of the background. So I'm starting with the mushrooms, and once I'm done the mushrooms, I'm going to actually go into the actual castle portion and increase the saturation in that, and then from there I'm doing the exact same thing into the tree as well. So by progressively increasing the saturation, I'm able to better control which areas are essentially going to draw the viewer's attention, and this makes it a bit easier when working too. So I'm just working on the background trees. Now the background trees aren't your focal point, so I'm not including as much saturated colors in those areas. I don't need to. What I have done though to separate out the trunk from the foliage is I've actually added a bit of a gray color. I will add this also into my foreground tree later on once I've determined exactly how dark I'm going to go for that in those background trees. So the background trees don't require as much detail work. They have to be a bit more simplified because they're receding, so you're not including as much detail. So those didn't take as long to do. They were much faster to work on them. So I'm just adding that same amount of gray into the foreground area. Now I have added that once again on a separate layer so that I can easily change the contrast levels of that. Just adding some highlight into the mold areas for the mushrooms, just to add a tiny bit of extra detail, and this is just some minor amount of detail that won't distract from the image. Working on the foliage right now, and essentially just making sure that I have enough saturated colors. Smoothing out the colors I already have blocked out so that they actually work in conjunction with each other. Because when you're blocking this out, generally it's not going to be all smooth. It's you're going to have to go in and tweak it quite a bit. It's definitely worthwhile going back and doing those changes though, because it makes a huge difference on the overall image. So this is the final image. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.